this is Gorf, Jordan B. Gorfinkel. Gorf is frog backwards, and now you won't forget it. And you are watching Taped with Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight.
But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug.
Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. We are here in Chicago this week with Jordan Gorfinkel. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
This guy...
What took you so long? You've been on the air for 25 years. This is the first time you're having me?
You know...
How am I supposed to take this?
You know, what can I say? You've come up... I think the first time that I really saw what you were doing was there was in the Ida Crown Jewish Academy...
Folks, this could go in a very bad direction. Yes, please finish the sentence.
In the Ida Crown Jewish Academy weekly email, something about you was featured as a former Academy student because you were in the news. And they put it on there with a picture of you as a little boy, you know, a freshman in high school or something like that at the Academy, and then a little blurb about you. So that was the first time I knew anything about you, but I really contacted you, as you know, this time because you were in town doing a program this week for PJ Library.
Right.
And just a little bit, PJ Library is an organization which provides Jewish reading materials and books to Jewish children. And so tell me how they contacted you. How did you get involved with them?
It's a tangled web that we weave, and as somebody who's into comic books, I can use that metaphor because of Spider-Man. I did actually work on one Spider-Man comic. People often ask me that. But we'll get to that in a minute. Long story short, I attended a Jewish summer camping expo that was sponsored by the, what's it called, the Foundation for Jewish Camp. They call it the Leadership Assembly, but it's a bit of a misnomer. Long story short, I saw Harold Grinspoon, who was a big philanthropist, a heavy supporter of Jewish education, in the hallway. I decided to introduce myself to him. We got into a conversation. I created a relationship with PJ Library. Eventually, they aged up into PJ Our Way, which is more my demographic as a comic book graphic novel guy, and that led to coming to do the Jewish Cartoon Workshop for JUF and PJ Library here in Chicago.
I want to just mentioning the comics, which is what we're going to talk a lot about. This week's choice of children's books includes a biography about Stan Lee of Marvel Comics. Perfect. So there you go, right in line with you and PJ. So let's talk a little bit about you. First of all, you grew up all over the country, but you ended up in Chicago. You have a lot of relatives still in Chicago, some who were on my TV show last March. And you went to Ida Crown Jewish Academy, you went to South Checker for a while, I guess, and stuff around the country. And how come you left Chicago? What was your reason for leaving Chicago? Did you leave Chicago to go to college?
I'm the product of a divorced set of parents. My mother remarried and married an Israeli businessman who was climbing the corporate ladder in America and was moving us around from city to city to city. I was fortunate to be in Chicago for a fairly lengthy period of time by my standards as a kid, which was 4 years, 1 year in Highland Park, 3 years in Skokie. And when I was a junior, he bought a business, a toy company actually, in the Washington, D.C. area, so we moved. So my junior and senior year were spent at the Hebrew Academy of Washington, which we called affectionately Hogwash.
Very nice, very nice. See, you've been around. How did you, first of all, I shouldn't say how did you get into the business, I should start out, what was your introduction to art? Were you drawing as a little kid?
I was, anybody who knew me in elementary school would tell you that one of two things. Either that I was a completely unrepentant doodler and I would draw on anything. Much to my teacher's chagrin, I would draw on tabletops and the margins of my papers. And I read comic books as a kid. And for me, the four-color, larger-than-life superheroes were the only constant companions that I had in a life that was rather transient. So they would say that, or they would say that I was never where I was supposed to be, because I was always getting into some kind of mischief. So I think the combination really kind of leads itself towards that path.
So we talked off the air about a mutual acquaintance of ours, a good friend of mine, David Steinberg, who went into animation and cartoons, working for a number of companies, including the biggest probably was Disney. But certainly he's in the business and also started out as an intern drawing cartoons. Did you do internships with movie studios and cartooning?
So David and Neely and their boys are good friends of mine now. And the funny thing is, for many years, he and I never really crossed over. In fact, we never crossed over. We never did cross over. He graduated from Ida Crown Jewish Academy, which is the modern Orthodox high school in the Chicago area, when I was an entering freshman. And for years and years and years, from then on, I would always hear about this guy who was the only other Orthodox Jewish artist that anybody ever knew of. And if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, "Do you know David Steinberg?" I'd be an incredibly wealthy man already. So cut to years later, I'm in Los Angeles, where for many years now, I've been commuting to Los Angeles on a regular basis for work. When you're in the entertainment business, that's the place to make your contacts and to get the jobs done. And finally I connected with him. He invited me to Disney. And I got to see, at that time, I think he was working on Hercules. I think that was
That was one of his?
Right, I think that was one of his immediate fast friends. He immediately welcomed me into the family, and since then, I have continued not only to stay in touch, but they have been kind of family away from my family when I'm in Los Angeles. And I'm sorry, I lost track of the question while I was talking about.
I was asking if you did an internship like he did. That's how he got started in the business, by getting an internship.
So David was in animation, and my entree was into comic books and graphic novels. So I did have an internship, and in fact that's the way that I started, whereas he was working in the moving image, I was working in the still or graphic image. So long story short is I was finished with my undergraduate degree at Boston University. I was living in New York City. I was taking night classes at School of Visual Arts. And during the day, I was temping. I did all kinds of crazy jobs to make ends meet while I was trying to basically run away from my destiny. And obviously, not long after, I found that destiny. And do you remember the movie Wayne's World?
Sure.
Okay, so this is kind of Wayne's World-esque.
Interestingly enough, it's being played on cable this week. It's one of the featured movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So folks, for those of you who don't know, Wayne's World is about two guys, I think actually in Wisconsin, right?
No, it's actually here in Aurora, Illinois. It's
is it really?
Chicago, and people have called me the rabbi of the Wayne's World.
Perfect.
So it's,
Perfect.
The cable access show that expands to the
right,
world.
and that's it. So cable access. So cable access was the internet before there was internet, and people in their basements or whatever would take out their heavy camcorders and somehow or other edit together shows, and then there would be one cable channel, like cable channel number 1 or number 999, that they would give bandwidth to. I think it was even a law at that time, right? That you had to do it.
It still is in Chicago. It's channel 19.
No kidding. No kidding. Interesting. So I was moonlighting as a director of cable access television, and one of my camera people was a young lady who was working at DC Comics. And when I learned that, I went crazy all over. You're kidding me. How do I get into that? How do I do that? Please set me up. Tell me what I can do. So she said, we have an internship program at DC Comics. Why don't you send a cover letter and a resume to whoever you admire in the masthead of the comic books that you read and see if you can get an internship. So I thought, this is fabulous. So I looked at the masthead and I chose names of people that I recognized, wrote a cover letter, put my resume in the mail, because that was really kind of pre-internet back then, and sent it off.
Probably more effective also.
These days, it's a whole different ballgame, but we won't go into that. So I went on to whatever my latest job was, hanging magazine photos or something on the wall of the bank. And very soon after, I came home to my Upper West Side of New York apartment, and there was a message on my, at that time it was a cassette message machine, but the equivalent of voicemail nowadays. A bit of an aside, I did my Jewish cartoon workshop today, and I used the word newspaper. And I had to remind the youngsters there that the newspaper is basically the internet if you print it out. That got a little bit of a laugh. So, so the message on the machine was, "Hey kid, this is Bob Rozakis from DC Comics. Come on in." And I can't do that. that imitation anymore. I'm not even sure that's an imitation, that's just my memory. So Bob Rozakis was a bear of a guy, and a guy that I knew from Masthead. He was, I think he was the Mr. Answer or Ask DC guy that you saw in the back, who always had a column, and he was a personality larger than life. So there I was, went to Midtown, rode the elevator up, I'm looking to my left and my right, and thinking this must be the star artist of Batman on my left and the star artist of Superman on my right, and I learned later, no, in fact, that was the guy who watches the chemicals off the photostats, and this was the guy who was the janitor, but these are important people too, who all became my good friends eventually. And I went up there, and I was ushered into a room, and there was Bob Rozakis sitting behind a big, sturdy oak table, at least in my mind, that's the way it is. So big, sturdy oak desk. And I'm not sure which was larger than life, the desk or the man, but they certainly suited each other. And he didn't say a word to me. He just opened up a drawer, and he took out a piece of paper, and he slammed it on the desk in front of me. And then he opened up the drawer again, and took out another sheet of paper, and slammed it on the desk. And he repeated this about 8 times. And then he handed me the sheets of paper. And I looked at them, and they were all of my resumes and cover letters. And he said, "Kid, you've got the job, just stop sending resumes." And that's how I basically got an internship at DC Comics. Wow. So everybody had forwarded my resumes to Bob, because Bob was nominally in charge of the internship program, probably because nobody else wanted to do it. So it just goes to show you, if you persevere, you can do anything. And if you persevere and work out like mad and have a dad who's left you a lot of money, you can be Batman.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, just as a little side note,
yes.
David Mazouz, who plays Bruce Wayne on Gotham, his sister is one of my daughter's best friends. They went to trip to Israel together. My daughter spends Shabbos with them. When she goes to visit my parents, her grandparents in LA, she spends Shabbos with them. So we have a connection to the Batman on the other side as well. So let's look at everything now. So you do your internship. How do you get involved in Batman? Because I am told that the Batman franchise itself, from the time you got into the reins of Batman, grew over 400% in revenue and sales of Batman products and Batman things that were franchised out, such as rides in Six Flags theme parks and figurines and things like that. How do you get involved to that point to build up a franchise like that, which ends up taking themes that you make into movies and so on and so forth? How did that all come about?
Well, you read a lot of comic books as an introverted, overweight kid, and you determine that you're going to somehow or other channel that into a career, and that's basically what happened.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
So it's a product of imagination, and of course a great team of people, because nothing happens in a vacuum, who all get together and decide that they want to continue the adventures of arguably the most popular and greatest fictional character in all of history, who's been around for 75 years at this point plus, and just grow the franchise.
So you today, you're not doing Batman anymore.
No.
You've expanded to your own stuff, but I know you guys still have a close relationship with them. Do you feel like they've taken your lead and where you've taken Batman and really built on it in a positive way in your mind, or would you have gone somewhere else nowadays?
It's a good question. You know, we're in a period of transition in politics. And the tradition is that when one president leaves, another comes in, that president, to paraphrase George W. Bush, the next president deserves my silence. I felt the same way when I left Batman. I had been on it for the better part of about 9 years. And I started as an assistant editor, and we were editing about 2 books. When we finished, the entire line was based off of an idea that I had created called Batman No Man's Land, which then became the basis or inspiration for The Dark Knight Rises feature film. I never thought in a million years that it would be filmable. It was a huge year-long arc that weaved through multiple storylines and characters and comic books. And all I can say is I was inspired, as most creative people are, by what was in the zeitgeist, what was going on at that time. Created a story that I thought would be very powerful in terms of its dramatic and emotional arc and taking the characters on a real roller coaster ride, real journey that would be interesting for readers and provide all of the aspects that comic book stories require. We talk about action, adventure, and suspense, and characterization, and emotion, and all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, yes, you have a look like you want to follow up.
No. I'm amazed. I'm amazed that all this actually came out of, you know, what you started. It's so big. It's so big. And even today, you know, to have a new weekly TV series, which is like in its 3rd or 4th season, I don't even realize now, it's just gone and gone and gone, and to build on characters' prequel.
Look, it's, you know what?
It's just amazing.
It's rabbinical in a way, because comic books and the meta-fiction that we traffic in, and that is particularly popular right now in the larger world of entertainment. You look at what they call the Marvel Cinematic Universe, for example, which is a reference to a series of movies that Marvel Entertainment has been producing that all tie together, that create one large story told almost anthology-like over the period of a number of years, but it's very planned out. So it's exactly the same thing as what we did, where we thought about where we wanted to go. We even had meetings, what we call bat summits. And we would talk about, we being the artistic team, the writing team, the editorial team, we would get together at the Terrytown Inn or something in upstate New York, and relatively upstate New York, and we would talk about, okay, where do we want the franchise to go for the next 6 or 9 months? What's going to be fun? What's going to be interesting? And of course, it still is a business, so what's going to continue keeping the presses rolling? And we would all pitch our ideas and build upon each other and really work as a nice team together. And eventually, the animation guys came along with the Batman animated series, guys like Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, and we were very close with them.
And you were involved with that too.
And they respected what we did. We had this, it was a mutual respect that we had. And we drew upon their source material, they drew upon ours. There's a recent movie that came out, Suicide Squad, for those who are old enough to have seen it. And one of the main characters in there was Harley Quinn. So here's an example of how the team works. Harley Quinn was created by the animated guys. I had Batman No Man's Land that I developed and was running, and I wanted to bring Harley Quinn into what we call the main continuity books, which is to say the DC comic book equivalent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you were to take a Marvel character and start him in the movies and then bring him into comics, so too here. Local chicane here, that you would see, I said it's rabbinic. So we took that character and introduced it into the mainstream comics and never looked back.
Right.
And now she's arguably, not arguably, I'm told by DC Comics that she is the 3rd most popular character. There's Batman, Superman, and now Harley Quinn.
And she's getting her own movie, I understand, which is an amazing thing.
She may
as well. That's what I hear in reading. I do read in the business, in the trades, and so that's kind of amazing. So you were involved in Jewish Impact Films, working alongside producers and directors from places like, you know, franchises like The Simpsons, Desperate Housewives, Shrek 2, and you did a number of student-oriented 50 short films or so for children and to teach. And so how did you get involved in that, and what was your goal with that?
So that segues nicely from what we were talking about before. It all ties together. So I mentioned before that working on a comic book universe or a much larger cinematic or entertainment universe is very rabbinical, or Talmudic would probably be the better way to put it. Because it really is taking the pieces of the puzzle and finding ways to organize a vast amount of information so that it's succinct and it's also a hook. You're interested in it, you're drawn in, and you want to know more about it. You can explore all these different avenues of the halacha, if you will, or the Masorah, which is to say the law or the tradition, the oral law or the written law. In my career, what I've been interested in more than anything else is storytelling. Storytelling can be done in any medium. It can be done with the still image, graphic storytelling. It can be done with animation, with live action, with various different combinations. It can also be done with music, which I'm very involved with as well. So for me, I try to find the most interesting way of telling a story and then determining the medium that would be best for telling it, or the media that would be best for telling it. And in that, to answer your question directly, and in that exploration, I am fortunate, I'm blessed in fact, to be meeting and networking with all kinds of interesting people like David Sachs, who was on The Simpsons, and David Weiss, who wrote the Shrek movies, and the list really goes on and on. So this is one small example. Jewish Impact Films is one small example of using our Jewish background to combine with media and entertainment, to be entertaining first and foremost, but also to hopefully have some kind of a Jewish foundation of, I don't want to say education, but certainly a Jewish philosophical or orientation, so that everything we do in some way is involved with Tikkun Olam, that we improve the world in some way, that it's not just throwing something out there for the sake of creating something, but hopefully in some way it's making the world better too.
That's an amazing thing. One of your other, I think, greatest things on your resume is Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey is the longest running female superhero series besides Wonder Woman, I understand. And so how did that come about, and how do you get something like that pushed through when you create something like that from scratch, you know,
Right.
out of your mind?
Well, once again, this segues nicely from everything that we've been talking about. So when you're Talmudic about entertainment and about comic books, you look at all the pieces and you think like a chef almost. How can I put together elements that already exist in a new and interesting way? So there were two moribund characters, Black Canary and Oracle. Oracle was the former Batgirl who was crippled in a tragic incident, violent incident, and it was now wheelchair bound and was focusing on using her mind to essentially be the living computer of the DC universe. You had Black Canary, who was a rather immature character, who in real life had been through several redesigns, failed redesigns. They kept trying to make that character, improving it, changing it, whatever, and nothing stuck. And they were just leaving the character, figuratively speaking, for dead. So I thought, well, this is interesting. Here you have a character who needs somebody to be her legs, and you have another character who needs somebody to be her steady soul. What if we have the two of them connecting together? You'd have a very interesting superhero team-up franchise. So we put them together. DC Comics was always very open, very welcoming to new ideas, to trying out whatever somebody was passionate about. And I was passionate about this series for two reasons. One, because I thought this would make an interesting pairing that I thought would be financially successful. But two, because I felt there was a huge audience for women, of women by women, of women characters that wasn't being met by comic books. So why not? Let's try a women's superhero team and see if I'm right that there is an audience for it. And DC said, well, let's give it a shot. And sure enough, collectively, the team was absolutely right, and we have never looked back. The series has been in almost continuous print for 20 years. We just had at Comic-Con, at San Diego Comic-Con, the largest pop culture gathering every summer. I hosted the 20th anniversary of Birds of Prey panel, and I like to say we had standing room and wheelchair room only.
Very nice. That's amazing. So I want to just touch one other part of your career, and that is the music side of your career. You have made music videos, you sing, you produce. How did you get into it, and where is that in your career, you know, as far as priorities? Because you do have a studio that you do some of this at.
That's my weekend job, because heaven knows I need one more thing to do. At the same time that I was working at DC Comics, evenings and weekends, I was one of the progenitors of Jewish acapella. And this is nice, it brings it full circle. This interview is going to have a really good arc to it. I appreciate that very much. So I and a number of Chicagoans transplanted to New York. We were all in our 20s, living on the Upper West Side, finding our spouses and our careers and so forth. Founded Bitachon, which was the first Jewish a cappella group devoted to exclusively original material and was professional. So this was not a collegiate group. And we were the first ones. And for the next several years or so, we recorded 3 CDs. Kids, that's just, never mind, look it up. and performed widely. And that then begat a group called Kol Zimra, which was an interactive, energetic simcha, meaning personal occasions, bar mitzvahs, weddings, and so forth, a cappella group, where instead of it being a stage show, that would cater to people who wanted the original music. This would be people who come in like your long-lost cousins, knowing how to sing all the songs that you want to sing, Jewish and pop music and whatever, and just making your occasion the most fun time, filled with music wall to wall. And now I have a group that's a super group that's merged from all of those past endeavors called Pella, P-E-L-L-A, short for the word a cappella, but also a pun for the Hebrew word wonderful. And we have a pool of over 200 singers in North America and in Israel from which we draw to be able to customize to the needs of all of our clients. And on any given weekend, we have 2, 3, 4 groups in New York and Los Angeles and Israel and the Midwest, wherever, that are performing, not performing, no, it's not performing, that are interacting, that are leading, exactly, that are motivating, correct.
How cool. Well, we want to see a little bit of Jordan on our show, so stay with us here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Jordan Gorfinkel will be right back.
What comes next? We're happy you ask. Whoa, come on. Whoa, oh my Hebrews. Whoa, let me hear you. Whoa, we're celebrating tonight. Tonight, there's a holiday party, gonna have a good time. Tonight, gonna eat lots of food and drink up some wine. No matter where you're from now, we celebrate it somehow. And that's right, that's right.
Welcome back. Well, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. This has been an amazing experience for me to find out a little bit more about you and to share a little bit about the amazing things you've done. I wish you much success with your comic career, with your teaching, which I know your workshops are very popular now, and it's a great thing. With your music career, you're making videos. I just think it's so roundabout, and it's kind of, like you said, I love how you put it, kind of, it all comes together.
Yeah, it brings the art full circle. I'm very into structure. So 2 things to leave you with. One is, I'm here in Chicago because I give a Jewish cartoon workshop in which I apply all of my skills to teaching students, campers, students in summer camps and schools, how to make their own Jewish cartoons, and then we collect them together into a comic book. My name is Jordan B. Gorfinkel. You can call me Gorf. That's like frog backwards, now you'll never forget it. And I am a Jewish cartoonist. I was the editor of Batman Comics for the better part of a decade. In newspapers across this land, in New York, in Minneapolis, in Atlanta, I draw a weekly Jewish cartoon in 4 panels, and it looks something like this. You're going to demonstrate for me that you are, in fact, professional Jewish cartoonist. If I ask you, can you draw a stick figure? Can you draw a stick figure? Yeah! Good. If I ask you, can you tell me a story about what you did this morning? Can you tell me a story about what you did this morning? Yeah. Good. So for your viewers out there that are interested, we'd love to be able to bring that to you. That's number 1.
So if you want to know how to get a hold of Jordan and do that, send us an email, info@tvrabbi.com. I will forward to Jordan and he will send you his information. So that's an easy way to do that. If you want to see our shows on the web or look up past guests, www.tvrabbi.com. I want to thank you again, Jordan Gorfinkel. Thank you so much for being on the show. Much success. Hope to see you next time right here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
Shalom, Godspeed.
Rabbi Doug on your TV show, where he's the rabbi for me. Anytime you need, you're gonna get married or you're gonna die. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.